Hi, I'm Shan Wu with the Under Color of Law analysis of Is Elon Musk Out? So, Politico had a big scoop. They were reporting that their sources are telling Rachel Bade in particular at Politico, that Trump has told his inner circle, including members of the cabinet, that Musk is going to be stepping back from his big role here, even though he remains pleased, Trump does, with what it is that Musk has been doing. Now, ABC separately also was reporting on this from their own independent sources, again talking about the idea that Musk may be stepping back. Then, of course, we have the White House, Carolyn Leavitt, who had this to say about it. And she calls it garbage, fake news. I will spare you putting up Musk's tweet on X. So one thing to keep in mind is there is this whole special employee thing, right? He's a special employee. There's a 130-day limit. Since when does the Trump administration care about rules, about limits and things like that? And we can question, what does this really mean to Trump? I mean, Trump's thinking, okay, he's temporary, we'll renew him as needed, or perhaps he's killing us with voters. Let's pretend he needs to go run Tesla. And what's really going on here? What's real here? Well, here are some things we can actually see. For example, the Tesla stock is really going downhill, and that his political posture, Musk's, really seems to be driving a mass exodus from the value of Tesla, at least. SpaceX is fine for him with these billions of dollars worth of government contracts, especially while he's got Trump and his cronies in the White House. But we can see something at work with Tesla, right? The stock is down by like 31% up to date, and his personal brand now, which is so closely associated with Tesla, is really going downhill. I mean, there are people who are protesting at Tesla dealerships, as we all know. People are saying they're going to boycott Tesla. There's even vandalism, which nobody supports, but that's happening. And then, wholly separate from his political posture, right? They just recalled 46,000 Cybertrucks to fix the fact that the panels are literally falling off the trucks. That's not anything to do with his political standing. It has to do with the way that they work at the company there. So there's definitely some problems going on for Tesla itself in terms of its value, in terms of its product. And let's add to this point that I was making about the trade-in issues with people trying to trade in Tesla, that Tesla is no longer willing to accept trade-ins of its own cars. Like, what's that say about their confidence in the brand? Now, to look deeper at this in terms of what does this mean for this struggle against all the abuses that are happening against civil rights and democracy right now, well, there's this really good article that I posted about in Mother Jones to take a look at. It's by Clara Jeffrey. And it actually looks back in the 1980s about how a big political movement, a couple of them, made a difference in our country. Now, usually when you talk about the big protests, everyone thinks back to the 1960s, the civil rights movement. And, that was obviously a tremendously revolutionary period, changed the U.S., changed the world. Sometimes we overlook relatively smaller movements in history that have a huge outsized effect on history. And a couple of these things that happened in the 80s are exactly that. I mean, it's not like they're so small you haven't heard of them, but let's take a deeper dive into them. So let's start with the divestment from South Africa. This was South Africa under the apartheid regime, where there was a movement that began to grow asking the U.S. and other nations to stop trading with South Africa, to boycott their products. And as the article points out here, that at this time, a lot of people in the U.S. weren't very familiar with what was happening in South Africa. But with student protests, with more world scrutiny on it, a lot of sunlight, amazingly, something really changed, right? By 1986, Congress actually imposed sanctions on South Africa. They banned direct flights to South Africa. Coca-Cola became the first major company to pull out. Sports teams joined musicians in refusing to play there. And there were lots of campus protests in boardrooms, as well as campus board of trustees boardrooms, as well as CEOs were being protested about that. What happened? Well, in 1990, Nelson Mandela was freed, and then the entire apartheid regime really began to fall apart. And by 1994, there were free elections were held and Mandela became president. Other thing was happening there, as this great article points out. There's also a huge famine problem going on. 1990s in Ethiopia, between 83 through 85, something like 1 million people died. And so the nightly news was really covering this, the image of starving children. There was Live Aid, anybody remember that? Actually, Freddie Mercury of Prince, I think, did a last famous performance there. But there was a lot of world attention paid to that issue. And one of the things that the article points out is when you're trying to put together things that really matter to folks, one of the things that really matters is when children are starving to death. And there's an interesting tie-in, right, this theme that runs through this, which is Musk, as we've reported on before, grew up during this period where apartheid was falling apart. And when he came to the U.S., he teamed up with some other former South African people like Peter Thiel. They put together PayPal. And you see in Musk a lot of things which, you can't specifically say that he's spewing a racist ideology, but, between the sort of Hitler-like salute and his positions he's taking on DEI, you might be able to infer that his own experience in South Africa, watching that system of privilege for him and his family collapse, may have contributed to the way he feels about things like DEI. And what else is he doing? He really has it out for USAID, right? We've talked about that. And what does USAID do? They provide famine relief and they provide medicine and treatment for people who need it. Something I was listening to tonight, Lawrence O'Donnell was pointing out that, famine is the one thing that really can be helped by food and relief. And the U.S. is in a great position to do that. Always has been, always will be, because we overproduce so much surplus food. This is a very easy thing for the U.S. to do something about. And the idea that, we're wasting money on USAID, we've got too much. You should be using your surplusage to help people. Now, what was it like back in that period? Well, at my small college in upstate New York at Vassar, there were protests during the 80s about the apartheid. And you can put up some pictures of this here. You'll also see really massive ones, like U.S. Berkeley, a hotbed for progressive liberalism there. Those protests made a difference. And if we run that theme through to what's happening right now, we can see that these kinds of issues, the racism inherent in trying to wipe out DEI, the oppression that's going on, the inhumanity of wiping out aid to foreign folks, and frankly, the inhumanity that's going to happen right now, right here, as Social Security checks start to slow down, maybe disappear. That is all a theme that can be used for us to shine sunlight on, not just about Trump's a jerk, Musk is a jerk. What's actually happening and how does that tie into people's being upset? Cory Booker, speaking for 25 hours straight, is channeling and inspired by real American pain and fear and anger over what's happening. So that's what we want to keep our eyes focused on. What just happened a couple days ago, by the time you see this video, is the enormous victory in Wisconsin, right? Musk's putting in $25 million there to try and replicate his, whatever it was, $250 million he invested in the presidential election to try and win that conservative Republican seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And he fails, even though he was handing out $1 million checks, to voters, claiming that there's nothing wrong with doing that. We'll see about that. And what did that get him? Was my favorite post image of that so far. We'll put that up for you. The cheese squashing the Cybertruck. Now, under this theory, we can use these results as a very effective way of massing protests. There's a big one coming up, April 5th. We've been supporting that, the hands-off movement. And by keeping the protests focused on these real-life consequences of what Musk and Trump have, quote, accomplished, that's what we really want to be telling people, telling our legislators, telling the media to focus on this, and talking this up, which is what is really happening, what happens when they do these things. So we're going to keep an eye on that with you and for you. Keep those replies and comments coming, and talk to you soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.